Hello, and welcome to another Bionicle video. Today we're heading back into the dark and twisted world of the Shadow Toa. So far we've survived the Toa Mata, the Toa Tahu, and even a couple of vehicles. But now, at long last, it's time for the scales to tip back in favour of good. Yes, it's time for the Toa of Light. So you're probably wondering why this video has taken so long to arrive, and the answer is quite simply that Light Toa are far more difficult to pull off than their evil counterparts. A lot of the pieces we need just aren't as easy to come by in white as they are in black, nor do they survive in such good condition, being more prone to staining and sun damage. But is the end result worth the extra effort? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Tracking down enough bodies isn't a problem, since they come in some fairly common sets, like Kopaka, Kopakanuva and Takanuva. The feet are fairly easy to get hold of too, and so are the connector pieces used for attaching the arms and legs. The heads are a little more difficult, but they come in a few sets, most notably Turaga Nuju, who has 3 of them. We need to get rid of Nuju's blue eyes though, and switch them out for yellow. And then we come to the limbs. The 6 Toa need a combined total of 24 limbs, which are a mix of 3 distinct pieces. There's the angled limb, used by Liwa, Kopaka and Pohatu. There's the sword arm, used by everyone except Pohatu. And then there's the Toa leg, which is mainly used exactly how you would expect, but also serves a secondary purpose as Tahu's left arm. None of these pieces are particularly hard to find in black, which is the colour we needed when building the Shadow Toa. In white though, well, let's have a look. First up, we've got the angled limb. We need 4 of these, and luckily they come in a couple of sets, Droid Developer Kit and Ice Slicer or Ski Throwbot. Both of these sets are from 1999, so they actually predate the Bionicle theme by a couple of years. But each set contains multiple limbs, so it's not too difficult to track down 4 copies in reasonable condition. Then we have the sword arm. The White Vaki Kirak comes with 2 of these, and we need 7, so if we sacrifice 3.5 Kirak to the God of Science, we have enough to continue. And finally, to complete the trinity of appendages, the Toa leg. This is a deceptively tricky bit to find, and one of the main obstacles for a full set of Light Toa, since it only comes with Toa Nuju in his Hodaka form. Old Nuju here isn't a particularly rare set, but he only includes 1, and we need 13 of them. Now, I'm not a superstitious person, but I should have known from that number that this was going to be a cursed piece. It wouldn't be a problem if we only needed a couple. Plenty of places have 1 for sale, maybe even 2, but tracking down 13 was a logistical nightmare. Still, we got there in the end. Of course, that means somewhere out there are 13 dismembered Nujus. Gruesome, but hey, it's the price of science. So we've got heads, shoulders, knees and toes. What's next? Well, we need gears to power the action features. Traditionally these are grey, but I wanted something a little more special to make these guys really stand out. I originally planned to go with gold, but the custom gold gears turned out a bit more coppery than I would have liked, so I went with custom white ones instead. Hopefully having so much white isn't going to be too overwhelming, but hey, if the Shadow Toa are all black, then it makes sense that the Light Toa are the complete opposite. Then there are these bobbly bits. I'm not sure what they're supposed to represent, but Tahu's got one, Liwa's got one, Kopaka's got one, and Pohatu's got 2, because he just loves to feel special. I started off by ordering white ones, but then I remembered our official Toa of Light has gold armour, so I picked up some gold ones too. Plus a few in trans yellow, which seemed thematic, and even some trans clear ones, although I'm not sure if I'll end up using them. And Bionicle just isn't Bionicle without masks. Official releases have given us a set of gold Konoe Mata to play around with, plus a set of white ones. Although the gold ones are nice, they don't really match the shade of gold used by Takanuva, so I've committed the terrible sin of painting a set in a shade that works a little bit better. Long term, I'd like to switch these out with a set of custom plastic masks from Zion Tyro, but he's only given us Tahu's How so far, so that idea will have to be revisited later. But having the How is enough for now, since it means we can see what works best and plan ahead. Then we just need to add in a bunch of white pins and axles to hold it all together, and we're finally good to go. Well, almost. One final step is to give everything a good wash in warm soapy water, because white plastic just doesn't look so white under 20 years of dirt and grime. But with those dried off, we are truly ready to begin. First up, Gali. She's looking pretty classy in her new colour scheme. Those white hooks appear in a couple of sets, and her transclear cow is exclusive to the mask packs. It's one of the more desirable masks for obvious reasons, so be prepared for a bit of a hunt if you want your own like Gali. But even if you can't find a clear cow, fear not. She looks pretty good with a gold one instead. You'll notice I've given her silver hooks too, which might seem like a strange choice at first, but remember that Takanuva himself ditches white in favour of silver for his own weapon. As mentioned previously, the small white gears that power her action feature are custom, since LEGO has never officially released them in that colour. The white pins on Gali's hips are custom too, but everything else is genuine Danish plastic. And here she is with Shadow Gali. These two look really striking together, pure white versus pure black, the only splash of colour being their eyes shining out from behind their masks. Next up we have Onua. Originally Toa of Earth, he's now flexing his new powers as Toa of Light. He looks quite skeletal in white, especially with those big bone-like claws he uses for digging. The claws come in silver too, and they look great when combined with the gold version of his mask, the Pakari. I still think I prefer him in pure white, but this version definitely looks good too. And here he is with his shadow version. Pure black isn't especially striking on Onua, since his usual colour scheme is already pretty heavy on the dark tones, but that just makes the switch to pure white even more impactful. Next up, Kopaka. Not the most exciting Toa of Light when you consider that Kopaka is normally white anyway, but he still looks different enough to be interesting, especially with those new white gear pieces. And if you're not a fan of pure white, you could always throw in some silver and gold to spice things up. The silver sword is an official piece, but to find a matching shield you'll need to head over to GoBricks and pick up a custom one. And here he is with his shadow version. It's a shame Kopaka's mask only has that one tiny eye hole because the design makes it much harder to see the nice splash of colour that his eyes provide. So we're halfway through and things are about to get a bit more tricky. We still have Pahatu, Liwa and Tahu left, but unfortunately their weapons have never been released in white. We're also missing another fairly important piece, which is the connector that is used for their hands. But we didn't come this far to give up, so here goes. Pahatu first, and thanks to his unique design, he's still easily recognisable even after we make a few improvisations to replace those missing pieces. We can use a different connector for his hands, along with some other bits to represent his fingers, and his foot pads aren't too difficult to approximate either. Of course, the foot pads aren't a problem if we go for the alternate silver and gold looks, since we can borrow silver ones from his Nuva form, but his hands will need rebuilding on both versions. And here's Light Pahatu alongside his Shadow version. Shadow Pahatu benefits from more accurate hands, although he does still need those improvised foot pads. Oh, and since Pahatu uses two of those bobbly bits I mentioned earlier, this is how he looks with those trans yellow ones in place of white or gold. I like how they match his eyes, but I think I prefer the other colours. And here he is with trans clear ones too. Again, interesting, but there's probably a better use for those pieces. Anyway, next up is Liwa. Again, we need to do some hand rebuilding, although only on one side this time, and because Liwa's fingers are built differently to Pahatu's, the proportions don't end up looking quite so wacky either. His axe, on the other hand, is a different story. The curves and angles make it quite a challenging piece to recreate, but I'm mostly happy with how this one turned out. The gold and silver version also needs a replacement axe, but this time there's a slightly more thematic solution. Jaraga Matau's staff comes in silver, so with a bit of tinkering it's possible to build a fairly decent weapon for this version of Liwa. And here are Light Liwa and Shadow Liwa side by side. Then finally we come to Tahu. Unfortunately, the only option I could come up with for replacing his iconic flame sword was to take one from Kopaka, which somehow just didn't feel right. Luckily, if we ditch the all-white theme, it gives us an excuse to try other weapons, like Takanuva's staff. I quite like this change, even if it does seem a little off-brand for the Toa of Fire, but perhaps this isn't Tahu anyway. Perhaps the Toa of Light are led by Takanuva instead. Or, well, Takamata I guess. The How and the Evoki do share a lot of similarities after all. And on the subject of Tahu's mask, we still have those custom ones from Zion Tyro to try out. We got some gold ones first. Lego only gave us one official gold How, well, two if you count the solid gold one, but now we have three more to play around with. There's a flat dark gold one, which in theory should match Takanuva's mask, but in practice is a little bit more dull. There's a bright gold one, which looks really nice, and then there's a slightly more muted gold, which matches the shade more traditionally used in Bionicle sets. Then we have a glow-in-the-dark one, which looks a little bit underwhelming during the day, but really comes into its own when the sun goes down. And lastly we have a glittery one, kind of like the powered up Evoki that comes as a bonus with Takanuva, although this one has a more bluish tint. Again, a really nice mask, although I'll probably stick with the gold for now. So that's all 6 Toa Mata of Light, built and ready for battle. In conclusion, these guys are much more challenging to assemble than their shadowy counterparts, but the real question is whether or not they're worth the extra trouble. And honestly, I'm not sure. I love the idea of Light Toa standing in complete contrast to the Dark Toa, and they definitely look great opposite each other. But to have come so close yet still be short so many pieces, not least Tahu's iconic flame sword, it really does feel like this project remains unfinished. Sure, there are ways to recreate those missing pieces, and perhaps I will at some point, but at the end of the day we already have a team of good guys to stand opposite the Shadow Toa, and in my humble opinion that team is pretty damn near perfect anyway. So that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you think, and leave your ideas down in the comments for what I should tackle next. But until then, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more Bionicle content. Ta-ta!